Hi, welcome. This is a tutorial on how to use a slit lamp by a microscope, which is a device to examine the eyes. Anyone who's used a pair of binoculars or a microscope should be able to use a device like this, and there's some very simple must-dos before you're going to get the best out of it. So what we've got here is a microscope, literally, mounted on a swivel pivot, which has the same coaxial position as the illumination system, and we can vary them independently. The first thing to do when you come to the slit lamp is know how to switch it on. Now, this may seem very sensible, but every slit lamp has at least two switches, one main switch and one to switch the illumination system on. And they may be here on a transformer box, they may be on the microscope here as in this device, or they may be on a pivot arm. So best to familiarise yourself how to switch it on. Is it switched on at the wall? Is it switched on at the power source leading to the microscope, which is a transformer, and is the device itself switched on? This one's pretty easy. It's got one switch here, another switch there, and another switch here. So you've got to be familiar with that. So I'm going to put the microscope on, and if you can see, we're going to be able to use the illumination system to create a source of illumination. Now, that will vary depending on how we vary the illumination on this stem. So there are two aspects of the illumination. One is how high the beam is, and the other is how wide the beamer is. The width is always down here on a rotating swivel, and up here we have a whole lot of other illumination variabilities, including different filters that we can put in to examine parts of the eye. For general practice purposes, you'll need either the white light or the cobalt blue filter. So mostly GPs in primary care will be looking for foreign bodies or sources of problems on the surface, and broad beam illumination is what you need for this. Once we're wanting to look inside the eye, we need a slit, which is created by narrowing the beam down to a very, very thin illumination, which can pass through the structures in the eye. So we can see front, middle, and back of the eye by using slit beam illumination. But mostly for general practice, primary care, you're going to be looking at the broad beam illumination to examine what's on the front of the eye. So I've got a terrific assistant here who's been around these instruments for a long time. So we're going to call on her in just a moment, but before we do, as always, when we're doing a medical procedure, make sure that you are comfortable. And of course, your patient must be comfortable as well. But you must be comfortable, so we need to alter the height of the chair or the height of the microscope so we're not bending over and going to hurt our backs or give us extra stress, and the same for the patient. So for me, we have a variable height, and often that is on a table, which may be a motorized table or operate by a spring or magnet mechanism. So you've got to know what's happening there with the table that you've got. So get the right height as you're sitting on your chair that you're going to be able to have a look down the what we call the oculars, the eyepieces. Next thing is, like any pair of binoculars that's got two eyepieces, we must adjust for how far our eyes are apart, otherwise we won't get an image that will be satisfactory. So it's useful to know what your interpupillary distance is, but easy enough just to look through and make sure that you've got equal images in each eye simultaneously. Once we've done that, we can then address our patient and get the instrument in the right place for her. So happily in this situation, we have a chair that goes up and down, but of course you will often have a gas lift chair in your practice as well. So just making sure everything's set up there for us to be comfortable and ergonomic. So the next thing to look at is the subject's position. And on all slit lamps, there will be a black line here, which ideally should be at the line of the eye, the lateral canthus. So we can see here, Shub's got a slightly shorter face than average. So we're going to have to raise her chin. And as we do, we're giving her the rack treatment. So we're wanting to lower the instrument down so she can keep her chin comfortably on the chin rest, and most importantly, forehead forwards against the forehead rest here. So mostly people will be wanting you to lift the instrument higher, but their forehead will then come back and you'll have difficulty focusing on the eye. So most important, chin and forehead are flush against the instrument, and that we have the eye roughly at that level. It's not too critical, but it just allows us the range for the microscope, which is adjusted also on a joystick. Now, most joysticks will go up and down as you rotate, and they will drive the instrument. Either I can push it like so, but there are finer movements able with the joystick alone. So what we want to do is switch the instrument on and then see where the illumination system is. And it's always useful to ask the patient to look at your ear. The top of your ear is a good spot. So what we have is broad beam illumination, and we can see that coming into a nice focus on Shub's eye. I can go up and down and side to side, and smaller increments just with the joystick. So this is what we're going to do first, is broad beam illumination. I'm going to have a look, and lo and behold, we've got a lovely view of Shub's magnified eye. Now, there will be usually a magnification system like there is on some microscopes and telescopes, and here it may be a rotational device, or there may be a switch which just has two magnifications, low and 1.6, or 10 times and 16 times. So we want to make sure that we've got a view that's comfortable, that we're going to be able to examine the front part of the eye. And we start with a systematic approach, looking at the lids, then the sclera, and then the cornea. So we can run across here and making sure that it's not too bright for the patient. You've got a posterior embryotox on, Shub. You know that? And we can get a really good look at all those structures. If there's a foreign body on the cornea, it should be easily apparent. And we can also look at the lids by everting. If we ask the patient to look up and just pull down gently, Shub, if you could look up for me, then we can get a really nice look at the tarsal conjunctiva. And equally, looking down, we can examine the superior sclera for any foreign bodies. The additional technique or equipment you may wish to have is local anaesthetic and some fluorescein dye. And that will allow us to see an abrasion or an epithelial defect. That's really the guts of what we're going to be asking primary care to look at doing. But those of you who have had experience with slit lamps, we can certainly look at what the slit beam, which we use a lot in ophthalmology and optometry, can do for us. So, Shub, if you could look towards my ear, and if we make that beam really narrow, if we could have a magnification right on Shub's eye, we should be able to see that we get a three-dimensional cross-section through the eye. You might want to come just over my shoulder and you probably will get that effect a little bit easier, but you can see the lines. There's a front line on the cornea, then there's a flat line which is in focus on the coloured part of the eye, and then we're actually looking in beyond the pupil to the crystalline lens, and the ability to examine all these structures in the front part of the eye should be evident. And we're often looking to see what's going on in the anterior chamber, the space between the cornea and the iris. The last thing for advanced trainees that we teach, which is probably out of the scope of primary care, is to examine the posterior segment of the eye, which we do with an additional lens. These are very high-powered lenses that can give us a virtual image of the back of the eye, because the optics of this device doesn't allow us to look at it directly. So in this situation, we can place a lens close to the patient's eye and focus on the image through the pupil and get a virtual inverted image of the optic nerve, macula, and blood vessels in the retina. And we can see out to about the equator, out to the outside of the arcades, and even close to the peripheral retina, but other techniques are necessary to examine the peripheral retina in detail. Last thing is looking after the microscope. Thanks, Shub, you can sit back. And that's really, you may find it in this situation as well, because when somebody moves it around, the whole thing is going to move and potentially become damaged. So we make sure we switch it off. We lock the device in place. There's sometimes one on the other side. And then we can lock the instrument, both of the rotating, both the illumination system and the observation system in place, so that when the machine's moved around, it's not subject to damage. I hope that's helpful, and hope you can attend one of our Slit Lamp education evenings.